Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we explore the future and what this means for your leadership. We ask the big questions. What's happening on the horizon? What does this mean for us? And most importantly, what skills do I need now for leadership of the future? It's time to explore. Let's go.
Hello, it's Zoe, and welcome back to the show. Lots to report on. One exciting thing on Planet Human this week. Well, it's actually not this week, it's from March. But I'm just catching up on all the news after being away in Bali and traveling and hiking for 2 weeks. Finally getting around to reading all these great news stories. And SpaceX had its third successful test flight of Starship, the monster rocket. And it made it all the way into space and disintegrated on its return to Earth, though NASA and SpaceX are touting it as a successful launch. It's the furthest it's been, and this rocket is integral to further moon missions as well as long-haul missions to Mars. If we can get this rocket up and going, up and down from space, it means that we can send larger and larger payloads into space and on those long-haul flights to Mars, which is essential if we're going to send resources to build a community long-term on the moon and Mars. So yeah, very exciting. And this is, of course, is what I've based a lot of Olympus Bound, my most recent novel, which is out and available for you today, on this whole premise that we can actually get stuff into space and live in space permanently to establish humanity beyond the confines of our planet, which will eventually boil dry, as you know, in 2 billion years. So we've got a bit of time to figure it out, but maybe not if there's some other major calamity either made by our own mistakes or by a big, massive object landing on the Earth and causing catastrophe. Right. Hopefully that didn't sound too rambling. It sounded a little bit rambling coming out of my brain, but onwards. So that is Planet Human. On Planet Zoe, I am pre-recording this as I am currently in Western Australia working with Outback Initiatives and one of their clients from Singapore on a leadership development program. So we will be caving and bushwalking and having lots of discussions about how to work better together and improving and increasing the leadership capability of one of the Singaporean agencies. Very fun work. I love it. I've been doing this kind of work since I was 17, so a few decades now, and I still absolutely enjoy it. My question for you today is, what really makes for good communication? You think you communicate well, and then you go on a podcast and ramble a bit. So what does make for effective communication? My guest today is Helen Young-McLaughlin. She is the CEO and founder of the Leverage Academy, and she is a champion of middle management, specifically mindful middle management, and the pivotal function that middle management has for culture and operations in general for most and many organizations. She's fabulous, and I look forward to sharing all of her great insights on communication and leadership for middle management in particular. So let's get into it. Woohoo! All the way from Annapolis, Maryland. Welcome to the show, Helen Young-McLaughlin.
Thank you. So glad to be here, Zoe.
Yes, I'm glad you are here too, because we're talking about one of those juggernauts that can get in the way of good leadership. So what I want to know, first of all, though, Helen, is how did you actually get interested in the link between burnout and communication at work?
Yes, how did I? I'm taking you way back with this response. Really, I grew up in kind of the power through mode, right? Hustle culture, but we can do it, maximize every minute of the day. And I guess I carried that with me into the workforce unknowingly. And, I can get teleported back to a point in time where I was actually working 3 jobs, postgraduate degree, and loving it. It was great variety. I was working in an emergency room, 16-hour shifts, so just 3 days a week. I was working for a consulting firm in D.C., Washington, D.C., and I had my own private practice. So this was exciting, lovely. Yeah, I'm doing it all, right? And there came a point where I wasn't doing it all so well. And this is really where I kind of learned about burnout and communication all in one fell swoop. So I was coming to work, specifically in the emergency room, feeling a little less enthused. I was feeling fatigued more frequently, and I was lucky because, it doesn't sound lucky, but there's a silver lining to this. I had a mentor who sat down with me and he said, we need to talk. And I said, okay, what's this going to be about? And he opened up a conversation with me that I'll never forget. This was over 20 years ago. And emotions kind of got released. We had a great conversation. He was very supportive. And he said, I need you to know that you are in burnout right now. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? But the powerful part of this, Zoe, really was that he was open, he was understanding and empathic, and he allowed, the space and grace, I'll say, for us to really talk about it. And then, without going directly into solution mode, we could just talk about what was happening. And that's where I understood that moment in time. I can go back to and feel it. And then after a little while, I really understood how powerful that conversation was and how important it is to be able, as a leader, specifically as a manager, as a leader, as a human, to be able to have those conversations and open up dialogue around what people are experiencing, to give them permission to share what they might be overwhelmed with, or even to ask a powerful question if they don't even recognize it themselves. So there is a direct link between burnout and communication.
Oh, it sounds like it. Yeah. To be able to tackle what is going on for somebody, because no one likes to be told, hey, you're burning out, because there is an association with burnout that you're not measuring up, you're not capable, you don't have the guts to soldier on, especially in hustle culture. And I'm curious about that looking back on that 20 years ago now, are you surprised that you didn't recognize the signs for yourself, that it took somebody else to point it out to you?
Absolutely. And here's the thing, this is going to sound funny. First, I was not taking care of myself either, and I wasn't recognizing that. So meanwhile, I specifically in the emergency room, I did crisis intervention work. So this was high stress, high pace. I'm drinking coffee at 3 a.m. I don't even like coffee, but I'm pouring in the creamer and I'm drinking that. So it's not like snap, it just happened. It was like, okay, that's what's going to get me through this shift. All right, on to the next. And again, it's just this mindset of, okay, I can keep up, because what I didn't want to acknowledge is I actually can't keep up. So I was wrecking my body, mind, soul, in the process. And although I knew I was feeling disengaged, I certainly knew that, like, oh, here we go again. It's going to be an exhausting shift. And, I even was surprised once I kind of moved through it that I didn't recognize my colleagues were amazing. They were such a support system, but I was getting really irritated. And I'm sure it was showing up in my communication, as my mentor described to me, and I had excuses for it. So when we're in it, it's really hard to pull ourselves out of it. We need that help from other people. And you're right. If he sat me down, that would have been a whole different conversation if it was like, hey, you're in burnout mode. But it wasn't like that. It was very open. We're going to spend some time together. We're going to have a conversation. And it was inviting in some ways to just be able to share.
And what I'm curious now too, what did you, after this life-changing conversation, what decisions did you make? Any big decisions right then and there? Or what did you start doing differently to take yourself out of it?
Yeah, actually, the first thing I came up with is I was going to immediately take time off. a solid week, and he was in full support of it. My team was in full support of it. And so I just needed some rest and recharge. So I mentioned that I had these 3 jobs. I was able to create space. And it's not just about taking time off, but that's what I needed right then. For, others, it could be different. And actually, you hit the nail on the head, is I reevaluated my priorities. I had to really sit down, and I say that tongue in cheek because, yes, I physically rested, but I also did some movement that I had been missing in my life, right? I love to be outdoors. I love, hiking or biking or just movement in general. And I needed more of that. So that actually started to give me a little bit more of a spark when I allowed myself to reprioritize those things. So those were the top 2 things. And then from there, it's really having an accountability partner. And for me at the time, it was, a counselor. Like, let me work through some of this. So I have to sort of reprogram my mind out of this thought that I have to hustle and do it all into what is it going to look like for me. And that was a wonderful investment I made in myself.
That's great, because so few people decide to take that leap and that investment in themselves. It's a hangover with the hustle culture, is that you've got to do it. You got to do it on your own. And it's such a mistake to think that we are stronger on our own. We're definitely stronger with somebody else there. So Helen, one of the things you talk about is communication, and your admiration for your colleague who sat down with you and explored this with you is evident in the way that you describe his approach. Effective communication is something that we all know needs to happen. In fact, I was talking to a leader recently, and he was telling me the story about, there was this big announcement about a development project that was going to affect his business. And he goes, yeah, I'm just hearing about it for the first time today. So communication has not been that great. And it's a chronic issue for leaders. There's never enough communication. There's never the right type of communication. So let's boil it down to brass tacks then. What actually makes effective communication?
Yes, let's boil it down. All right, so I'll boil it down from my perspective. And I like to think of it as the 3 C's. Connected is first. I'm all about results through relationships. So the conversations need to be connected. Clarity is important. I find it fascinating, and I see it within myself too. But I find it fascinating when I'm speaking to leaders and managers, and I ask them to bottom line or really synthesize what they want to say, and they have a really hard time. If they're having a hard time, I can tell you your team is having a hard time, or your customers. So it's connectedness, it's clarity, and then it's curiosity. I'm a coach, right? I'm a leadership development coach. And one of the core things that I try to gift to those that I'm able to work with is the power of curiosity. It's something that we don't talk about enough. So being able to not go into solve mode, not go into fix it mode, but just ask some questions. So being connected, being clear, and being curious, I think are the 3 things that I would say equate to effective communication.
It sounds very simple, but in reality is those 3 can be quite complex. So let's dig in a little bit. What does getting connected with somebody, how do we actually do that? What does it mean? How do you know that you've done it?
Yeah, it's funny because I have a program. It's called the Leverage Academy, and it's where I work with usually a cohort of about 10 managers over a 6-month period. And one of the first modules that we do is connect before direct. And so it is taking that opportunity to not just dive right into something and not just have the passive, how are you, but really tapping into something of value. And so that to me is what connected is really tapping into something that is maybe motivating for another individual, seeking some kind of alignment, or just diving in a little bit to what does your day look like. That's a simple way to connect. And I think it's really important because, again, hustle culture, fast, 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 we can do these simple connections in a very short period of time, 60 seconds even. And it really allows somebody on the receiving end to feel more valued instead of just, we're throwing tasks at each other.
I like that. So connect before direct. I think that's lovely. And even that easy question, what does your day look like today? Gives people a chance to just go pause. Well, thank you for asking. This is how it's going to roll out potentially. And that's a good one. Looking at clarity, let's be clear. And I think that's an interesting one too, because leaders often think, I was super clear in that direction. What's going on? Why didn't they understand or follow through, whatever? So what are your tips for clarity?
Yeah, so you're right, Zoe. I mean, there are so many people that are like, I can't be any more clear. And well, maybe that's true, but this is also an indication if your team is coming back to you and they're still saying they don't get it. It's an invitation actually to take a step back and get some feedback. So for clarity, I like people to think about the bottom line message. Right? So that is a coaching tool. Can you bottom line that for me? And I will ask people, especially some people that get a little more tangential in their communication, or you can see that they're trying to process and figure it out, just bottom line it for me. I also have a client who loves to provide details to the nth degree. While I think that's fantastic, you lose people in the process. So I'll recommend, hey, can you pop that bottom line to the very top of your message, whether it's verbal or, you're sending an email or something, and then put the rest of the details later. Let people understand why this is important. So clarity comes down to, why does this matter?
Love it. I often think of the bottom line message as what's the headline? Bottom line headline.
Right. Yes.
But your clarifying question, why does this matter? Like, why should I pay attention to this is really useful. And it's useful not only in verbal communication, but as you mentioned, in an email. And that's something we do so poorly often with emails. We don't use the subject line to our best advantage to create this is what this thing is about, and this is why it matters. And you can bottom line it or headline it right there on that primary real estate.
100%. And I have a framework that I offer to people. It's just 3 words. It's called intention, growth, and impact. And it really kind of helps them get clear. So if they're not sure, if they're trying to make a decision or they're trying to communicate something, I say, what's your intention? What is the purpose of this conversation? And then I jump over to the impact. That's the why. What are the results? Why does this matter? And then the middle, the growth, is like, what are the action steps that need to happen to get there? And oftentimes, if people use that framework, it helps them, digest and say, oh, okay. And then they can, be yourself. And this is just helping you get set up for that conversation.
I love it. Yeah. And if we think about those 3 things, that slows us down and it prevents us from barreling in with random requests or unclear requests. So your third C, curiosity, you mentioned staying out of problem solving, which is, actually quite challenging to do as a leader because we feel like the shortcuts to progressing things is just tell them what they need to know and move on. And yet when we do that, we deny people the opportunity for growth. And we also deny people the opportunity for connection. So any suggestions on how we can avoid just filling in the gap with the solution and staying in curiosity with questions?
Yeah, so put a rubber band around your wrist and snap it every time you want to solve something or fix it. It's hard. It is hard. This is something that we are naturally inclined to do, most of us. We want to get in, we want to solve it. And especially, Zoe, I work with, before you're an individual contributor, now you're in this management mode. As an individual contributor, you are ready to solve. That's what you're probably really good at, and maybe why you were selected to go into management. So it's a big shift. And some do it a little easier than others. But what I would say is we want to empower people. We want to be able to lessen assumptions. And when we go diving right into fix-it mode or solving, we're not empowering people and we're not helping them, as you already mentioned, to grow. And so it's like a mirror. We got to say, how do I want others to view me? And how can I call it exercise this skill, right? Getting curious is exercising. Communication is something that should be exercised every single day. If you really want to get good at it, it's like lifting that, even just like a 2-pound weight, but you're doing it consistently every day and strengthening that muscle. And I think that's something that people need to think about when it comes to effective communication and curiosity. It's not natural for many of us to just lean back, ask a question, and learn how to build that skill.
I agree with that. And I think one of the things that leaders don't know that they need to struggle with and that they ought to struggle with is, and you said it as if this was an obvious thing, but it's not obvious, is that we want to empower people. But in fact, some leaders do not want to empower people, and they may not know that they do not want to empower people. In fact, they quite like the power to themselves, which is why they direct as opposed to coach, where they tell instead of ask questions. And I think that is actually a pretty important thing for people to examine, because if you go down that road of hoarding the power by not empowering people, by not asking questions, then you create a whole other different dynamic. And I think this is actually really important work for leaders to do. And sometimes there's no imperative for them to do it unless they're getting some strong feedback from their own supervisors or from their team that they're doing so. So I think that's also a little hidden trap for folks to pay attention to.
I agree. And we're creatures of comfort. We stay in our comfort zone. So that's what I love about, again, the work that I do is when I start working with a client, whether it's individual or in one of my groups, we agree that you want to grow, you want to be developed, you want to stretch yourself. That means getting uncomfortable. And let's talk about what that looks like. And that, some of the top leaders that I work with, I'll reflect back and give them some of that, kind of what I call a little bit of truth telling. And if they're willing to make the adjustment, they're doing great. If they're not, basically they're going to keep repeating the patterns and seeing the same patterns within their own company. So it's a little bit of wasting time. But I've been really lucky for the leaders that I've been able to work with who even have that kind of control and command style, that they have been able to kind of take a step back and, listen to the feedback from myself or others and make those hard adjustments. They're not easy, but they're possible.
I believe that too. And that's a good thing. Another aspect of communication that is challenging, and it goes hand in hand with the power concept as well, is needing to collaborate. And it's not just cooperate, like, okay, we'll do things side by side. That's cooperation. The collaboration, when we bring people of equal status or people of different status and different influence and different authority to the table, and we're meant to create something together, to deliver on something together. Collaboration is actually quite challenging because people tread on each other's toes. You have to decide who's responsible for what, how you're actually going to deliver on this thing. What are your insights and tips for how we can do collaboration? And in fact, what do you see as the obstacles to collaboration, and what are the solutions?
Okay, so first of all, how can we do collaboration and do it better? I would like every listener here to go back to their own organization and pop that at the top of their agenda. Ask that question on a regular basis. Maybe even add in, what are we doing well when it comes to collaboration, but specifically, how can we do collaboration better? I think that's really important. Sometimes we want to do all things and know all things when we just need to stop and ask a question and really set the space aside to be able to answer it honestly. And I think leaders can do this if they put a little more value into this type of work. So that's my first thought when you were talking about collaboration. The next thing that I want to say is the obstacles, especially in today's work environment, are all around us. Lots of layoffs are impacting people. We're working with less staff, but same amount of work. So we're in this reactive zone. So those two things right there are kind of red flags, I would say. The other thing is we have this, remote work, hybrid work, some in the office work. And when people get into those silos, which I see in many different organizations because it's head down, task oriented, focusing on those things, that's not going to benefit people. So you have these obstacles. There's certain ways that you can, create open discussions without inviting in more meetings, because Zoe, we know we don't need any more meetings bogging down our calendars. But I do think that there are some specific ways, and that's actually one of the reasons I created the Leverage Academy, my program, is because each cohort I bring together, even if they've been working together in some capacities, I find it fascinating that every single cohort has said, wow, I didn't know. Oh my goodness, it's so fantastic to understand what's happening, in that department. I had no idea that you all were working on this, but that collaboration that the program brings to, the space that we're in for twice a month is one of the reasons. That connection and collaboration is one of the reasons that I created this program. It's essential in the workplace. So I think, you're developing relationships over time, specifically with the program that I have. You're increasing trust, and that's what you need in order to have those people inside your workplace that are experiencing their colleagues in a different way. That's what we ultimately want. We don't just want to be pushing tasks and managing progress. We have people who are involved. We need to share ideas in a different way.
Thank you, Helen. I want to clarify also, your Leverage Academy, is that an open enrollment kind of experience, or is it individual organizations take a cohort to you for a particular curriculum?
Yes, so the organizations come to me typically, and they'll have, up to 10 managers that they want to go through the program to elevate their skills, because perhaps either they're slated to go into a management position or they're currently in a management position and they just want to give them that development opportunity to build skills while also collaborating with their colleagues.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for clarifying that for me. So collaboration is a pretty important aspect of the workplace these days, and it's a good antidote to the silos, or sometimes it requires people to break out of their silos to actually collaborate. One of the things that you mention in some of your communications is that reactivity is actually a good thing. And I'm thinking about people sitting around a table trying to collaborate. How is being reactive any time a good thing? So can you please explain what you mean by reactivity actually being a good thing?
I can. Yeah, this one, it always gets, when I'm in with senior leaders or something, they're like, wait, what? So what I mean by this is it's an indicator, right? Reactivity, when I see it of course, being kind of a neutral party going into an organization, I can pick up on some of these things better than when you're inside your own organization. Just like I was describing back in the emergency room, when you're in it, it's really hard to kind of recognize these things yourselves. You might notice little glimmers of it. But for me, when I start to see reactivity, I'm like, okay, most companies are solving lots of different things, and they're working on many priorities at once. And so they may not always notice this, but when we see this happening, there's actionable things that you can do to help lessen it and to create some momentum for better ways to communicate. So when I say reactivity, it's a good thing. I think it's a really great indicator. It helps to hit the, pause button, to not go into fix it mode right away, but to create in some sort of plan to say, we see this is happening. What are some ways that we can partner, whether they have an outside consultant like myself, or they just kind of disrupt what they're currently doing, to start thinking about what can we do differently to lessen this. And that's where you can start to build the skills. If it's a skill building issue, if it's a process problem, you can take a look at that and you can start to measure that over time.
Okay. So if I've understood this correctly, the reactivity is basically a red flag. It's like, oh, someone's having a reaction to this. Great. Let's dig in and find out why. Be curious. So use your curiosity questions to understand what's going on and diagnose it a little bit before you then can look at what needs to change that's contributing to this. I like that better than someone's having a bad day and they're having a freak out. Good.
Well, and each of the clients that I talk to, when they're in reactivity, they don't want to be in that. Nobody wants to continue to feel like they're not following through in enough time, or that everything's rushed. Nobody likes the feeling that goes along with that. So you have to take a look at it. Is this a pattern? And if the answer is yes, then you go into your next question. And again, it's all about disrupting those patterns to be able to identify what's the new path we need to take and then communicate that.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. So recognizing as a pattern and then getting curious about what you can fix it. All right, Helen, are you ready for the Fast Five?
Oh, let's try it.
Okay. What is the future technology you most want right now?
Okay, I have to say that this conversation came into my household and we were talking about this. So I'm going to bring it to your listeners, which is, wouldn't it be great if there was, I'm all about workplace wellness, right? Let's lessen burnout. Wouldn't it be great, just like you could pop in AirPods, if you could pop in and teleport yourself like a VR experience throughout the workday into the beach or someplace wonderful, because it's giving you that intended break you need. Now, what I would ideally love, Zoe, is for all systems to shut down. That will probably give people the hives and, go running from this podcast right here. But to shut things down, allow people to just breathe, connect with something they enjoy, infuse some beautiful scenery into their headspace, and let's create a more joyful work environment by infusing those.
I like it. That's lovely. Thank you. Number 2, what's the best tip you ever got for leadership?
Trust your instincts.
Nice.
Don't get caught up in just stats and the shoulds and the data. Trust your instincts.
Cool. Number 3, what's one problem in the workplace you'd love to wave a magic wand and be fixed right now?
Well, I think people probably know where I'm going to go with this, which is put development at the forefront. Put development as a top priority. It's not a luxury. It's essential. It actually helps companies save hundreds of thousands of dollars and will help them retain their top talent.
I love it. Number 4, thumbs up or thumbs down? Leader you want to give a thumbs up to because they're awesome, or a thumbs down for leader who is not doing something so good?
Okay, so I have 2 beautiful teenage girls, and my response to this might not be what you expect, but I'm going to say Taylor Swift. She has created so many different things when it comes to connection, and we've talked about that, from the friendship bracelets to bringing, families and groups together through her music. And I think that she's doing a number of fantastic things in terms of giving back, encouraging people to vote. So I'm going with Taylor Swift right now.
Yeah, awesome. She is a cultural phenomenon, that's for sure. Very interesting to watch her do her thing. All right, number 5. What is your favorite leadership book or podcast aside from the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast?
Yes, yours would be my number 1 for podcast. For book, I'm going to say Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. I appreciate Brené Brown's approach, and she talks a lot about vulnerability and taking off the armor and having the courage to do that. She's also research-backed, and so I appreciate, that part that she brings into it. And for us to be able to see vulnerability as a strength, I think it would be a beautiful thing.
I like that. Thank you so much. That was the Fast 5.
I made it.
Awesome. The Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast is proudly sponsored by the Amplifiers Academy. It is an online self-paced leadership development program that you can join at any time and progress at your pace. There are very short video lessons, great checklists and resources and recommendations and book summaries, all there to help boost your leadership thinking and abilities. We focus on leading strategy, leading culture, leading change, and leading performance. So if you want a go-to resource that can help boost your strategic abilities immediately, check us out, Amplifiers Academy, on the zoerouth.com website. See you there. Helen, one of my last questions is, what do you see as the future of work? How does it look like to you?
I'm not 100% sure about how to answer that, but I will say that if I blend the things that I've talked about today, Zoe, which is, connection and curiosity, along with, those leadership tangible skills of curiosity, let's blend that with mental health and put the mental health and learning as a top priority. I think that's what I'm envisioning. Love a lot of things that your listener, that other guests of yours have put on here. But for me, I really want to imagine a place where well-being is not just a side benefit, but it is a top priority.
Yeah, that's a future I can sign up for. Thank you so much for that, Helen. Helen, where can people find out more about you, the Leverage Academy, and the work that you do?
Yes, they can go to my website, HelenYoung.Coaching.com, and you can learn more about me. And I also invite listeners to please connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Helen Young-McLaughlin, and that's got a little hyphen in between. I would love your feedback. What did you take away from this podcast? And just to connect with you.
That's fantastic. Now, last question. Is there a question I haven't asked that you'd love to answer?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think one of the things that I would love to just kind of highlight, if I could, is workplace burnout is real. And when our values aren't in alignment with what we're doing, it's going to show up. It's like sandpaper. It starts off as like a little bit of sandpaper on your arm. So if anybody is experiencing, those feelings of burnout, which might be a little more cynical feeling, a little more negative, exhausted mentally, physically, just ask for what you need. Have the courage to do so. And again, if you want to reach out to me directly, I'm here to have a chat with anyone.
Thank you, Helen. That's a lovely call out and a lovely indicator and a great vision for what we can do as leaders to create a great place to work for everyone's benefit. Helen, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was delightful. I love your energy. I love your focus. This has been terrific.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good one.
I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation with Helen. She is a genuine, wholehearted, determined, connected kind of human, and I appreciate the work that she's doing out there in corporate land for creating better places at work. Some of the tips that I've taken from the conversation are connect before direct, right? It's people before task is my mantra as well. And I think if we just pause a little bit to ask a question, what does your day look like? For example, then we have an opportunity to seize the moment of building a little moment of connection. The other takeaway is to prioritize development of your people. People need connection, especially when it's super busy. And I think organizations shunt their development aside as a nice to have, that we should be doing that, as opposed to we must be doing that, because without our people, we have nothing. Okay, so speaking of connection moments, the tips or the reading I want to give you is from my third book. No, wait, Moments is my second book. Moments, Leadership When It Matters Most. And this is about speaking up. And speaking up is one of the most challenging things that we can face as leaders and as humans. So here's a little excerpt about that. Speaking up requires that we overcome our own biological urges for connection and safety of the tribe. It means we'll be seen. If speaking up means we need to fight the fear of being attacked or of being excluded from the tribe, why on earth should we bother? Here are some compelling reasons. We avoid complacency in the face of injustice. We stop being complicit in the face of inequity. We add color and depth to conversation, avoiding the gray beige of status quo. We stop playing victim and take charge of our own life. And yet, I know this is sometimes not enough to strum the courage chords within. When we don't speak up, we sail close to shore in the safe shallows of unfulfilled potential. Our ship of life is a grand vessel. It is not meant to keep to shore. In the shallows, it gathers barnacles, and the keel tangles in weeds. If we look out to sea, just past the headland where the water turns a little rough and wild, we see the drowning face of our captain, the person of integrity we always thought we could have been. It's never too late. We can learn to speak up and steer our ship out to sea and save the captain of our soul. I'm quite pleased with that, with that passage. I thought, geez, Zoe, that's not bad at all. And the whole point of it is learning to speak truth to power is one of the most challenging things that we can do. In fact, I'm going to be focusing quite a lot of that in my next book on power when it comes out later this year. So up next on the show, we've got JJ Brunn, the retired spy, talking a little bit more about how to understand and connect with people. In the meantime, did you know you could get a free audiobook when you sign up to get notifications for the podcast? Go to zoerouth.com, click on podcast. You can sign up right there, and you can get the free audiobook version as well as the ebook version of Terra Blanca Insurrection, which is the prequel to the Gaia Enterprises series. And it's all about good leadership intentions gone bad, with plenty of insights for you as a leader of what not to do and some of the common power traps that we may find ourselves in, even when we think we are doing the right thing. In the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic day and a fabulous week ahead. Live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast. To find out more about leadership of the future or to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.